I just let my father-in-law have with me. I'm an idiot. He's continuously been strangely flirting with me, and last night, he has begun texting me once more. I've just left the hotel room where I let him me. I don't know why I did it. The was amazing, not at all like anything I've experienced before. I let him come in me as well. My husband is dead. I won't go into details to stay mysterious. He's not really my father-in-law anymore, is he? Just a 55-year-old man I slept with. I'm in my late 20s, and the whole time he was texting me, I felt numb. It didn't feel genuine until he was on the best of me. A while later, he has begun texting me again, and I found myself craving that connection. I need you. It would be ideal if you let me come over, he texted. I live alone, so I let him come over again last night. I'm just so numb. I don't know why. Furthermore, I'm not blaming him, it takes two to tango. It wasn't assault. I can't clarify it well, it was more like I didn't care in case we had I was exceptionally numb, and I've been numb for a year. Not only that, but I didn't realize it was going to happen until he was taking my pants off. Thanks for the kind words from those who've examined my confession. I'm going to begin therapy. I realize this is often incredibly twisted, and I don't know how to clarify myself. The deadness started long before my husband passed away. It was like living in a fog where every feeling was muted, every sensation dulled. My father-in-law, or rather, the man who utilized to be my father-in-law, was always there, a steady presence in my life even after the tragedy of losing my husband. His texts were a lifeline within the ocean of deadness, pulling me from the depths just sufficient to feel something, even in case it was just the warmth of another human's touch. He was never overtly improper before last night, but there was always this undercurrent of flirtation, a look that lingered a bit as well long, a touch that felt too intimate for family. I didn't act on it at that point, but last night, when the loneliness was overwhelming, and his words were like a siren's call, I let myself get pulled into the current. The room we met in was simple, a hotel with generic decor, but it felt like an escape from reality. There was no judgment here, just two people seeking something to fill the void within. He was gentle, almost too gentle at first, as if he knew the fragility of my state. But then, there was an intensity, a passion that seemed to wake parts of me I thought were long dead. I shouldn't have let it happen, but in that moment, I didn't care about the consequences or the morality. It felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself, or maybe just running from the pain of my loss. When he whispered in my ear, it was like he was speaking to the part of me that was still alive beneath the numbness. The act itself was a blur of sensations, the first time in a long while I felt anything profoundly. The warmth, the closeness, the release, it was all so overwhelming. And then, when he was done, and I lay there, I felt the weight of what I had done. Yet, there was no regret, just a strange sense of peace, like I had momentarily escaped the cage of my grief. After he left, I sat in the quiet of the room, my thoughts swirling. I knew this wasn't the solution to my pain, but it was something, a moment where I wasn't just surviving but feeling. The texts continued, each one a reminder of what had happened, a tether to this new reality I had created. I didn't know how to feel about it, was I just seeking comfort or was there something more twisted at play? The next day, when he came over, it was different. There was no hotel room to shield us from reality, just my home filled with memories of my husband. Yet, I let him in, let him take me on the couch where I used to sit with my husband, watching movies, laughing, loving. It felt like a betrayal, yet also a desecration of my own numbness. This time, I noticed more of him, not just the physical but the man. The lines on his face, the way his eyes held sadness, perhaps for his son, perhaps for me. It was in these moments I realized we were both broken, seeking solace in each other's brokenness. After he left that night, I sat in silence, the house feeling too big, too empty. I knew I needed help, something more than these fleeting moments of escape. Therapy was something I had considered but always pushed away due to fear of confronting my grief. Now, it felt necessary, not just for what had happened with my father-in-law but for my own healing. I'm not sure where this leaves us, him and me. But I know I can't continue like this, living in a haze of numbness punctuated by moments of guilt-ridden clarity. I need to find myself again, to mourn properly, to heal. And maybe, just maybe, in that healing, I'll find the strength to deal with what happened, to understand it, and to move on in a way that honors my husband's memory while also allowing me to live. The journey ahead feels daunting, but for the first time in a long time, I feel a sliver of hope, a desire to emerge from this numbness not just intact but whole. Therapy is the first step, but I know it won't be the last. I have to learn to live with my loss, to love again, to feel again, without the shadow of my past mistakes or the comfort of temporary escapes. I realize now, writing this, that I've shared more than I intended, but perhaps it's what I needed to do, to lay bare my confusion, my guilt, my hope. Maybe someone out there will read this and feel less alone in their own struggles, or perhaps it's just my way of beginning to understand myself again. Whatever the case, this is where my story stands now, a point of change, of turning, of seeking something beyond the numbness. Story 2. My wife cheated on me 10 months ago and I forgave her and took her back. Now I want to have a one-night stand. I thought I owed it to the people who gave me constructive criticism and very thought-provoking PMs to update on what I decided and has happened. I barely slept last night, just tossing and turning, just trying to figure out what is going on with me. It wasn't easy, but by morning, I started to formulate some sort of idea of what was going on and whether or not I could ever get past it. By the time I got to work, I knew what I was feeling and thinking. But I still needed to figure out what I was going to do, but most importantly, what I needed to do. I had my assistants take over with my work for the most part so that I could take care of some personal matters, I told them. When in reality, I was just trying to hash out what I had to do next in the near future. At one point, I realized that having the one-night stand was actually not me. I was the one who was faithful for 10 years, loved my wife unconditionally, and promised to be there for her throughout our marriage. So why should I throw my self-respect and dignity away all because she screwed up? I would be losing by letting her push me to the edge like that, not winning. But even with deciding not to go through with the ONS, I knew I had to talk to my wife and let her know how I was feeling and what I wanted. I texted her and told her to try to get home before 6 p.m. so that we can have a talk. She asked me if something was wrong and I told her that we just needed to talk about us because I didn't want to alarm her for the entire day. I get home and we immediately sit down to talk. I tell her that I love her and that what I was going to tell her wasn't easy. I begin by telling her that the last 6 months have truly made me happier than I was in the 4 miserable months of separation. I had hoped that the happiness that I had would be enough to get us back on track, but every time I thought things were progressing in the right direction, I would have my moments of darkness. Moments where I would look at her smiling and acting normally as if what she did was deleted from her memory even though I knew it wasn't. Moments where I would realize that when she cheated, she unraveled all the love and beauty that our relationship had produced in the last 10 years. Because of how I felt that way, we were essentially at ground zero and back to square one. We had to basically date again before we could even act like husband and wife. For me personally, I had to take a step back from time to time and see why or how my wife betrayed me the way she did. Why she couldn't come to me and tell me that she was lonely and feeling neglected. After all, we would tell each other everything. She didn't tell me she was hurting, so instead, she selfishly let another man have her in bed. She had many opportunities to step away that night, but she didn't, and that stings. Sleeping with my wife the last 6 months has been hell. I told her that even with the very occasional number of times we did sleep together in this period, I felt like I wasn't sleeping with my wife but rather another man's wife. I am so disconnected every time and have to endure sporadic thoughts of whether or not she did what we were doing with the other guy. Having sex was no longer something pleasurable that we did as a couple but rather a challenge we had to do as individuals. She started to tear up at this point, about to interrupt me, but I told her I needed to tell her more. I explained that no matter how much I loved her, there was still this dark cloud that always reminded me that she cheated when I was faithful and a great husband. I explained to her the imbalance I felt because of my pride and how I once contemplating having a one-night stand with another woman. She continued to tear up and kept listening. I explained to her that I realized I was better than that. That just because she did something wrong didn't mean I had to do something wrong too just to make myself feel better. It wouldn't have been fair to me nor her. But unfortunately, my decision not to go ahead with the ONS didn't have much to do with my love for my wife as it did with self-respect and pride. And I say that even though I love my wife very much. I told her that I realized that the ONS or anything else for that matter will probably never fix what has been broken. I commended her for trying hard to make it up to me the last couple of months, but it wasn't her that was the problem, it was me. No matter what she does, I will always remember her betrayal, and for me to linger on that thought would not be fair for myself or for her. I told her that I had forgiven her for what she had done, but my forgiveness, unfortunately, isn't strong enough to endure years and years of anguish through a healing process I don't even know will fare well in the end. Somewhere at this point, she broke down crying and told me that she would do anything to win my heart back because she loved me so much. I reminded her that she was a great person in that she tried very hard to do that already, but I was just the problem. I told her that I loved her enough to finally let go, let her find someone else that she can start over with and can see her for the woman I once saw her. She broke down and said that I was the only one she wanted to be with and that she would never want to be with anyone else again, that she couldn't because her heart belonged to me, etc. I felt a little bad but reminded myself that this was best for me and this would be my true and only selfish moment, not with a stupid ONS. I told her that I would be filing for divorce in a while but in the meantime would still be living at home, staying in our guest room. I told her that the house and 2 of our cars will be hers while I take my own car, a classic, that I spent years to restore. And everything else will be split according to what our attorneys agree upon. She cried some more, but I told her that I loved her and that she had been a great wife for 8 years, but all great stories must come to an end at some point. I gave her a kiss on the cheek and gave her some space to cry and gather herself. As for me, I'm not sure what the future will hold, but I will surely take my time and do what I need and think is best for me.